While watching this rally for Kashmir, please tweet and post this link on your social media and invite people to watch. Use the hashtag Justice for Kashmir. We will be posting chants throughout this rally for Kashmir. Please follow along. We'll have 2 instances of live chanting as well as recorded chants. So please, I know we wish we could all be out in front of embassies, and some of us will be out on August 5th as well. But because of COVID, Corona, we're having this historical digital rally for Kashmir and joining people from around the globe. So, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, with hardship comes ease too. So please share these chants widely. We've posted them on our Instagram page, on our Facebook pages, and we will be doing this as well. The chants will be shown on the screen. When they're shown, please feel free. We will, during those 2 times, and I'll announce those times, when we do unmute people, please feel free to connect with everybody loudly and show your support for Kashmiris. Use the question and answer box to raise questions. We will respond to all those questions as the best as we can, time permitting. We have received some questions earlier on, and we will make sure those are given first priority. Join us on August 5th for mass action. Sign up for a Twitter storm, use the hashtag Kashmir Action, and invite 10 of your other friends to join in. But our biggest ask is, if you're here and you're not already working towards the Kashmir cause, please volunteer 3 hours a day for 3 months. Summer vacation is here. Many of our younger people are, they're home and do not have much to do. Use this time wisely. There are many local actions in your countries, in your cities that can be done, and we'll be sharing some of those throughout the program. And the speakers will be sharing some action items that you can do. Please note those down. This has to be a global movement. And if after 3 months you want to continue helping Kashmiris, we will still welcome you. You can volunteer more time with these organizations. And we've posted a link up on where you can sign up to volunteer. So now, inshallah, for the house rules, we will start with the recitation of the Holy Quran. I invite Hafiz Muhammad Atif. Hafiz Muhammad Atif is the Imam of the Macon Islamic Center in Georgia, United States. He received a master's degree in finance from IIUI and learned tajweed and qira from Doha, Qatar. Bismillah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما لكم لا تقاتلون في سبيل الله والمستضعفين من الرجال والنساء والمستضعفين من الرجال والنساء والولدان الذين يقولون ربنا أخرجنا من هذه القرية الظالم أهلها الذين يقولون ربنا أخرجنا من هذه القرية الظالم أهلها واجعل لنا من لدنك وليا واجعل لنا من لدنك نصيرا الذين آمنوا يقاتلون في سبيل الله والذين كفروا يقاتلون في سبيل الطاغوت فقاتلوا أولياء الشيطان إن كيد الشيطان كان ضعيفا يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله ولو على أنفسكم أو الوالدين والأقربين إن يكن غنيا أو فقيرا فالله أولى بهما فلا تتبعوا الهوى أن تعدلوا وإن تلووا أو تعرضوا فإن الله كان بما تعملون خبيرا يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين لله شهداء بالقسط ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون وعد الله الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات لهم مغفرة وأجر عظيم صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah khair. We will now have the translation by Babar Dar. Babar is of Kashmiri heritage from Srinagar, Kashmir. Assalamu alaikum, Babar.
Wa alaikum salam. In the name of Allah, most merciful, most kind. And what reason do you have not to fight in the cause of Allah, to rescue the helpless, oppressed men, women, and children who are crying, Our Rabb, deliver us from this town whose people are oppressors. Raise for us a protector from you, and send for us a helper from you. Those who are believers, fight in the cause of Allah, and those who are unbelievers, fight in the cause of the Hud, false deities, Shaitan. So fight against the helpers of Shaitan. Surely Shaitan's crafty schemes are very weak. O believers, stand firm for Allah, for justice, and bear true witness for the sake of Allah, even though it be against yourselves, your parents, or your relatives. It does not matter if the party is rich or poor. Allah is the well wiser of both. So let not your selfish desire swerve you from justice. If you distort your testimony or decline to give it, then you should remember Allah is fully aware of your actions. O believers, be steadfast for the sake of Allah and bear true witness, and let not the enmity of a people incite you to do injustice. Do justice, that is near to piety. Fear Allah. Surely Allah is fully aware of all your actions. Allah has promised those who believe and do good deeds that for them is forgiveness and mighty reward. Sadaqallahul Azim.
Jazakallah khair, Babar. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. This is your co-host, Amina Ahmed. Thank you for being a part of this momentous rally, joining people from around the world. Next up, we have a brief introduction to the Kashmir rally by Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid. Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid is the founder of Justice for All. He was named as one of the 500 most influential Muslims in the world 8 times in a row. He is Chair Emeritus at the Parliament of the World's Religions. Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Amna, and thank you, Hina Zuberi. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alladhi kafa. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad al-Mustafa. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون صدق الله العلي العظيم وصدقه النبي الكريم نحن على ذلك من الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Dear sisters and brothers, thank you so much for sparing early morning with us. We are being watched right now on Galaxy 19 satellite, as well as muslimnetwork.tv and about 50-60 other social media, including several hundred people on Zoom who have registered. This shows that we are really with Kashmiris. And as Hina Zuberi said, the world promised Kashmiris that their voice will be heard and their voice will determine the future of Kashmir. But the world has gone silent. There came a tremendous opportunity when India reinvaded Kashmir, redivided it to conquer it once again. We are all up in arms, demonstrations, rallies, and slogans, some every day, some weekly basis. But as always happens, and it is a human thing, we are not blaming ourselves or anybody, that it withered away and pandemic. And while in Kashmir, they are changing Kashmir altogether. 1 million soldiers silently in different mechanisms who occupy are being giving domiciles and settling people to permanently change Kashmir. So while the world is worried about the pandemic, India blaming Muslim with coronavirus hashtag is completely changing Kashmir. Kashmir issue was not born yesterday. It cannot be resolved tomorrow, but it will require a consistent, persistent, endured effort. And word for persistence, endurance is one word which we know is called sabr. The words of the Quran, which I recited for our guidance at this moment, that verse is very clear. O believers, adopt taqwa, be mindful of God Almighty. Each one of you must consider what are you doing for the future of the Kashmiris for us at this moment. Ittaqullah, and fear God. Is fully aware of what we do. So let's not despair. For the first time in 70 years, India is on the defensive in America. And why America is important, I'll tell you in this. For the first time, Kashmiri voices are on the newspapers. For the first time, Kashmiris have started 100-page reports or more about torture in Kashmir. Kashmir voice after 70 years have become a uniquely dominant voice. We don't want to lose that momentum. And people in the West have responsibility. Why? Here's the key point. 90% of Indians who are working in America are high caste Hindus. They are looking for liberalism in America, but supporting fascism in India. And fascism and Nazism, by nature of it, clouds the mind of people. And they will continue to do things which are looking like maddening things. But India doesn't want to become superpower. And these 90% of all Indians here, they're listening and watching how much trouble Modi has already given them. So our work is cut out to focus those people who are in the West to ensure that Kashmiri voices remain the dominant voices. They are heard. And this thing, which is started in a big way about a year ago, and now at the eve of August 5th, when reconquering and reinvasion of India to the Kashmir, let's commit ourselves, if not a whole lot, 3 hours a week for 3 months. If you're satisfied with the progress, we will move forward. And this is the time. I hope you're using Twitter and social media to tell what we are doing right now in next hour and a half. But at the same time, August 5th is going to be a global Twitter storm on Kashmir. I hope each one of you will sign up, as it is mentioned in the chat box and Q&A. And at the same time, this is the time in America when politicians are out talking to you. Are you talking with them? Collect 30, 40 people in your neighborhood and have a Zoom meeting. We will facilitate how to invite your congressperson to that gathering, have a domestic issue of justice, and have a Kashmir issue to talk with them. We'll provide you the talking point, and we will also provide you the leave behind letter that once meeting is over, what are they think they need to do. So my brothers and sisters, don't give up. This is our time. For the first time in 70 years, Kashmir is not going away. Yes, pandemic is there. Yes, we are all worried. May God Almighty keep us all safe and healthy, and especially the Kashmiris who have been suffering for so long. So there are many Muslim causes, but let's focus on one cause, Kashmir cause. But if you're already focused on other cause, we still welcome your du'as and your support. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for that introduction to the rally and how to get active on this cause. Jazakallah khair. Our next guest is someone that has been vocal about Kashmir, has been one of those folks that has been, put his life on the line to speak up for Kashmir. It's my great pleasure to invite today Dr. Mirza Saib Beg to speak about a paradise in lockdown. Mirza Saib Beg is a Kashmiri lawyer, Kofi Annan and Weidenfeld Hoffman scholar, and a candidate of public policy at the Blavatnik School of Government, University of Oxford. He's a gold medalist graduate and a former president of the University Student Union at NALSAR University of Law. He's been a legal practitioner in India and currently based in the United Kingdom. He has lectured on Kashmir in societies at the University of Oxford and the University of Cambridge. Welcome, Brother Beg.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Just to clarify again, I'm not a doctor yet, but inshallah, maybe soon I will initiate my PhD program. I'm doing a master's program at Oxford currently. I'm a candidate over there right now. So over the course of my portion, I've just divided it into three parts because I'm one of the first speakers. So I thought it would be good to give an overview of what we have experienced in this last 1 year. Just a brief touch to most of the stories that may not have been covered in the media as much. The second part will be just to touch upon a little bit of the propaganda that has been used by the BJP government in India to subjugate us. And finally, I'll touch upon the legislative changes that are taking place right now, which will cause an irreversible change in Kashmir. In the past 1 year, our lives have been upended by a theater of unending war that is being wrought upon us to satisfy the pursuit of electoral interests in India. Throughout this year, we have been responding to one crisis after the other, as India feeds its population a rhetoric of moral superiority that allows them to wage war not just on the aberrant Kashmiri, but also on the putative directives of Islam. First, Kashmiris were not allowed to communicate with our families for months. People did not even know if loved ones were alive or dead. Messages of death were forwarded on WhatsApp groups, hoping that they would reach a loved one living in a far-off country. I personally know of many people who came to know of the death of a mother, a father, or an old person in the family a few days after that death through such messages. The first video we saw of our homes after the initial communications and movement restrictions, once the lockdown was imposed, the first video we saw of our homes was a BBC video that showed people running away from gunfire. One Kashmiri recognized his mother in that video. It was probably the first time he had seen her in days. In a few months, people were automatically deleted off WhatsApp groups because of the algorithm that saw them as dormant accounts. In terms of the magnitude of what we endure, the deactivation of social media accounts is not really high on that list. But this occasion was an odd moment for us, as if WhatsApp was announcing the virtual death of these accounts. These were groups of our loved ones, our friends, people with common interests that had been painstakingly built and curated, and it was all gone in a few seconds. Some students living abroad sent messages to local TV channels informing their families that they were alive. Soon, these students ran out of money because online banking was also shut. So Kashmiris collected funds and gave money to people we did not even know. Such is the spirit of our people. It is a moment where we are reminded, where the world is also reminded that we cannot be defeated. In this entire year, we have faced mass arrests, we have faced judicial apathy, media ban, torture, killings, and the Indian state has continuously engineered anxiety and shock to make us wonder if they will commit mass killings, go to war with Pakistan, go to war with China, or both. And finally, with the rapid legislative changes taking place, which are making way for disenfranchisement or forcible transfer of population, we Kashmiris fear that our home will never be the same again. And the explosive tension in Kashmir will lead to some catastrophe that is going to push us into more conflict. There is a pattern around the world right now. Libya has been in war for 7 years. Yemen's war has been going on for 6 years. Afghanistan has been in conflict since the Soviet invasion of 1979. The Somalis have been fighting for 40 years. Syria has been ravaged by war for years now. And it appears that world leaders and international organizations are either not interested or incompetent at arriving at peaceful resolutions. In Kashmir, we also fear that we are going to be added to the statistics of destruction around the world. Moving on to the second part, which I wanted to discuss, was the propaganda that is being used to subjugate us. The Indian government claims that their policy decision of annexing Kashmir and ending whatever little autonomy there was on paper in Kashmir, they claim that this is going to bring economic benefits to Kashmir. However, due to the destruction of our e-commerce by internet restriction and by the devastating blow to our economy, Kashmir's Chamber of Commerce estimated a loss of $2.4 billion just between August and December last year. Right now, our losses are estimated at over $5 billion. We have endured the world's longest ever shutdown of internet in any democracy. The effect of this has been on 8 million people. 45% of our population now is showing symptoms of mental health deterioration. Our export has declined by 62%. Kashmir's tourism has declined by 86%. And having said all of this, It has also been claimed that this decision is going to facilitate more investment into Kashmir. It needs to be said that Article 370 and Kashmir's little autonomy was never a hindrance to investment or development because Indian companies had always been free to invest in Kashmir. The lack of investment is directly related to political turmoil in Kashmir, which is only set to exacerbate with public anger. And it is pertinent to mention that despite 72 years of political and military turmoil, Kashmir is well above nearly all Indian states in human development indicators. Further to this, there are also engineering legislative changes which are going to have irreparable and irreversible consequences. The consequence is immediately aimed at creating demographic change in Kashmir to frustrate any future resolution on self-determination or any democratic resolution of Kashmir. In the very first week alone since these changes were announced, 40,000 non-Kashmiris were given domicile certificates. Right now, there are reports of buses full of non-Kashmiris entering Kashmir. Now, all these people are going to be given political rights. They will be given voting rights in Kashmir. And this is aimed at disempowering the Kashmiris. This has a special attention needs to be paid to this because most Kashmiris anyways boycott elections. So through these people, they will engineer a new vote base to legitimize their own actions in Kashmir, to create a facade of democracy, as they've been continuously creating through various client governments over the years in Kashmir. It also complicates a legal situation because assume 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the line, the descendants of these non-Kashmiri domiciles will have become part of the economic and social structure in Kashmir. At that point, it raises legal questions as to their rights. In the event of a final solution, a resolution, self-determination, or a plebiscite on Kashmir, it raises questions on their rights as well, on how they will be segregated, how they will have to move out of Kashmir, or if we can make them move out of Kashmir. So it definitely complicates the situation, and that exactly is the intention of the government of India, to complicate the situation to such an extent that a solution becomes impossible or at least impractical. Right now, there are two immediate effects of this domicile law, the first being on jobs and the second being on ecology. Before the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Order of 2020, there was a total of about 500,000 jobs available in Kashmir. These are all government jobs. The reason I highlight this is because the government has completely destroyed any form of private industry. So all employment is only through the government. The bulk of the employment in state is through government initiatives. So the state becomes the largest employer for the people. These jobs earlier were available only for permanent residents of Kashmir. But under the new arrangement, it opens the field for anyone, any Indian who meets the criteria, and this is being done without taking the consent of the people of Kashmir. In 2016, the Economic Survey report pegged that 25% of our population between the ages of 18 and 29 is unemployed. And these new changes are set to increase the levels of unemployment. The intention of this change seems to be to make people completely dependent on the state. Any transgression will be met with a heavy penalty. The other point to be understood is that only 30% of land in Kashmir is habitable, is fit for habitation and cultivation. It has already been admitted by a pro-India government in the state, the Mehbooba Mufti government, that 4 lakh canals or about 50,000 acres, 20,000 hectares of land are under illegal occupation of the Indian Army. So there isn't much habitable and cultivable land to go around for the new domiciles without deforestation in Kashmir. This unplanned influx of Indians is going to cause an irreparable impact on our ecology. We have living glaciers in Kashmir. This deforestation is going to have an impact on the ecology over there. We have already endured a flood a few years ago. So the livelihood of people, our way of life, our culture, our system of governance, everything is being attacked. Already in Kashmir, there was very little autonomy internally. But now, through these moves, even that facade of internal autonomy or democracy has been removed. Kashmir until now was the only Muslim majority state in India. But they have bifurcated our state into 2 parts. They made it into 2 union territories, one of Ladakh, the other of Jammu and Kashmir. The object of this bifurcation is to divide the Muslims of Kashmir into manageable populations. The Muslims of Kargil will be balanced by the non-Muslims of Leh. The Muslims of the valley will be balanced by non-Muslims in Jammu. And there is right now talk, there are rumors of a new division being created in Jammu, which will take away south of Kashmir. So the Muslims of South Kashmir will be balanced by non-Muslims in Jammu. And then Kashmir may continue to be a union territory. So the government of India is now exercising naked, undiluted control without any facade of local governance, without any facade of client men, client governments in Kashmir. the effect of all of this can only be calamitous. I think my time is up with that. I'm happy to answer any questions on these that you may have towards the end.
Thank you so much, Brothers Saib. We'll now be playing a short documentary on torture in Kashmir.
Army is a 14 regiment Dogra, Major Multani. The Patas Tulas Binivas Army Center, that is called torture. The this is a Kalam Center was as a ruler Tulant Karas ruler. Mias Unjitswar started Zang Donovan Jepet cut. Agar Misseti Zulama Karnas, Patkorna, the government Kanti Ensa, Ya Kanti, Ya Kahesa means Ayalas.
Civilians get tortured, women get tortured, children get tortured, old men and women get tortured.
मतलब वो टॉर्चर के मेथड बहुत सारे थे, बहुत सारे तरीके थे, वो सारे उन्होंने इलेक्ट्रॉनिक करंट हो, रोलर हो, टांगों पे चलाना हो, फिर स्ट्रेचिंग करना हो, फिर बट्टों से मारना हो, तो किकिंग, बॉक्सिंग, वो सारा कुछ मतलब थर्ड डिग्री उसी को कहते हैं.
It's not just this militant group that they say we torture to put these people into discipline. No, that's not the thing. They torture anybody. And in Kashmir in general, things don't get reported that much, you know, because we have the Indian media who always manipulate the facts, distort the facts. They don't want the world to know what's actually happening in Kashmir.
100 people were shot dead in 5 months, civilians. What you saw in the newspapers, what you saw coming out in news channels or reports or writing, is not even 30% of what happened on the ground. They seized newspaper copies. They seized communication. They did not want any communication to let out. They went to the printing presses, seized those communications. The story of this place has to be told by us.
The fact is, torture happens to women as well, but because of the social stigma, they do not talk about it.
Women of different age groups were raped. It includes minors and adults also. One pregnant lady was also gang raped. She gave birth to a baby whose arm was broken.
We have not been able to document more than even 10%. I think less than 10% the human rights violation, the massacres. But we are doing it, you know.
My son should not grow up in oppressed nation. He should not see army personnel in every corner. One day, I wish I could see the free Kashmir.
I have a son. It comes in my mind a lot of times what he's going to see while growing up. I want him to see a better world.
Kashmiris endure because we believe that the only way to respond to the injustice and respond to the tyranny and the oppression that is being perpetrated against our people from last 27 years is to stand fast. If we give up, then it's over. And Kashmiris would not like to give up. We have shown the way that resistance works. Resistance works in the way that we are here still.
Our next speaker is Muzammil Ayub Thakur. Let me tell you a little bit about Brother Thakur. He was born in Indian occupied Kashmir, and he's the United Kingdom-based director of the Justice Foundation under the umbrella of the Kashmir Institute of International Affairs. He's the president of the World Kashmir Freedom Movement, which represents the resistance movement in Kashmir to the world. His father was exiled in the 1970s from the Indian occupied Kashmir with penalty of death if he was to ever return, and is the only person in the history of India to be convicted of treason. He's regularly invited to international events to talk about the case of Kashmir, such as the United Nations, the OIC, international universities, and foreign governments. First, he's going to be speaking about how the Kashmiri diaspora can meaningfully impact European public opinion for Kashmir. But before he starts his speech, I'd like to invite Brother Muzammil to lead us in chants for Kashmir.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. A lot of the chants that I grew up listening to are the ones that I'm going to repeat today. Some of them are controversial, so those are the ones that I will refrain from. The standard one is Hum Kya Chahte, and the response to most of these questions will always be Azadi. So I will ask you, Hum Kya Chahte?
Azadi.
Zor se bolo.
Azadi.
Cheen ke lenge.
Azadi.
Hak hamara.
Azadi.
I think that will probably be enough of the Urdu ones. We also have a couple that we usually recite in English for our English audience, which is always 1, 2, 3, 4, occupation no more. And that is something that has been standardized by the Palestinian brothers and sisters as well. And then we have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. India is a terrorist state. So you can see the contrast that we try to make. So I'll repeat that again. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Occupation no more.
No more.
5, 6, 7, 8.
India is a terrorist state.
And the last one that I will recite is the one that is most important to me personally, which is Go India, go back. So I'm going to say this, and inshallah we'll end on this. Go India.
Go back.
Go back.
Go India.
Go
back.
And finally, Hum Kya Chahte.
Azadi.
Inshallah.
Please go ahead. We're waiting for you to start your speech. Inshallah, you'll be speaking about Kashmiris in Europe, and especially how the Kashmiri diaspora can meaningfully impact European public opinion for Kashmir.
Thank you for inviting me to speak on Kashmir in regards to the European public opinion. I think it's an interesting subject, but it's also a very a quick subject that we can go through, because for most people that have been, particularly those people that are in the diaspora, be it Europe or the US, lobbying public opinion that has been garnered or developed for the Palestinians, for the Rohingya, for the Uyghurs, for Burma, for Yemen, for any of these causes, it's pretty standardized of how you're supposed to go around that, what kind of work you're supposed to do, and what kind of lobbying needs to be done. So it's a pretty quick question and a quick answer. When it comes to the media, we understand how you develop public opinion. When it comes to the man on the street, we understand how you develop public opinion. When it comes to institutions, however, that is where it becomes a little bit tricky, be it the United Nations, the OIC, or various different institutions that I'm affiliated with, or even embassies and parliaments that I've visited with experience. I tell you that it is slightly more complicated, but even then, that does not mean that it is not impossible. Complication is not impossible. Complication is just something that you need to learn from. Now, public opinion is usually formed when there is a particular narrative, facts are available, and the narrative is consistent and cohesive. And there is an existing traction on this issue, particularly post August 5th, where we were probably in a much better position for advocacy than we've ever actually been. And I think Mirza touched up on it, that it was the BBC that started highlighting the issue of Kashmir. And I think it's also worth mentioning that it was the Indian government that started, and the Indian media itself that started talking about how the BBC was fake news. And we've heard that terminology before. And it was the media fraternity It wasn't us, it was the media fraternity like the New York Times, Washington Post, ITV, CNN, and all the other institutions that backed up their fellow colleague, the BBC, in making sure that the voices of Kashmir and the story itself came out. Now, one of the most important things is to have groups. When it comes to lobbying and influencing, we need to have groups. And it's very important that there is these groups are internationalized. So we have various people in different locations coordinating efforts, especially the indigenous people, so that there is consistent lobbying. There is a consistent narrative, and everybody understands the direction that we're going. Now, although my topic is about Europe, there is more impact and effect when a global strategy is adopted. When campaigns are launched, usually there is a global movement within the Kashmiri community to support that campaign so that the wider audience can be reached. And there are various different examples, be it the free political prisoners or the pellet cases, and different institutions, different groups that have started those campaigns. We've seen it far and wide, and from Australia to South Africa to the UK to the US, and even to some extent South America. Now, in my experience, people have been desensitized to, well, mostly desensitized to international conflicts. And huge numbers of statistics no longer leave the same impact as it used to. So the strategy that I have adopted for the last many years is reflecting on individual tragedies so that the case can be more humanized and personalized. And there are a million cases. Every Kashmiri has suffered in one way or the other. Every Kashmiri, not a single one has not been a sufferer. Now, just on this panel, I can talk about, if they permit me, Syed Faiz Naqshbandi. He was in the United Nations, this is Syed Faiz Naqshbandi, who lives in exile. He was in the United Nations lobbying the case of Kashmir, influencing the European parliaments and various institutions, the OIC and all the other NGOs that exist there. And he received the information that his mother had passed away. He did not have time to grieve his own mother's passing. He could not perform her last rites. And he continued to lobby the cause of Kashmir. Or even Shaista, who continues to live in exile, born in Kashmir and lives in exile, her entire family, never to be able to return again. Atarzia, only yesterday, 24 hours ago, the Indian contingent of trolls and Bhakts and Sangis started attacking her for her views on Kashmir, and they started trolling her on Twitter. Or even Ahmed, and I'm sure that he will talk about this much more than I, but it is important that we mention people like Ahmed bin Qasim, who has never had a meal with his own family. Now, during this lockdown, this COVID-19 lockdown, people complained about 4 or 5 months of not being able to see their friends and family. Ahmed has not had a single meal with his own family. He has not been able to communicate with them, let alone video. I mean, we're using Zoom and YouTube. We have all of these different forms of technology. Ask Ahmed how it is for him. Now, when we talk about cases and individualizing and personalizing, and specifically different issues inside Kashmir, for example, when we talk about thousands of pellet victims, there is more impact when we talk about 18-month-old Hiba, probably the youngest pellet victim of Kashmir, who is now blind in one eye. When we talk about tear gas used to disperse crowds, there is more impact when we remember Tufail Matu and Wamik Farooq, who were killed, or even Yawar, who had a tear gas shell hit his head, who is now disabled. When the subject of rape is being used as a systematic weapon of war, and is being discussed in various forums, it is more impactful when we remember Asiya and Nilofer, who were kidnapped, raped, and thrown into the river. Or 8-year-old Asifa, who was kidnapped, raped, and killed by Hindu fundamentalists who smashed her head with a massive rock. When we talk about torture, the example of 5-year-old Nasir's eye being punctured with a needle and sand being poured into it. Or Kalandar, whose legs were cut off and was force-fed his own flesh. Or narrations from my own hometown, where children were being taken to the local masjids and tortured under loudspeakers. Or the Guantanamo Bay style torture meted out to innocent Kashmiris, and the types of cases that we should be putting forth. The subject of tens and thousands of enforced disappearances should always include people like Parveena Ahangar, who has been looking out for her son for the last 30-odd years. When the matter of gang rapes are highlighted, individual cases like Mubina Ganai, who was raped on her wedding night, or of Kunan Pashpura, where an entire village ranging from the ages of 8 to the ages of 80 were raped and gang raped, or of Zarifa, who was 9 months pregnant and gave birth to a son with a broken arm 3 days after being gang raped. When the subject of trauma is mentioned, the mother I met still searching for her son outside of the school that he was killed in front of springs to mind. She hasn't been able to absorb that information yet. When we talk about political prisoners and draconian laws, we should be able to give examples, such as 48-year-old Masrat Alam, who has spent more than 23 years in jail, or Qasim Faktu, who has spent 27 years in jail, or his wife Asya Andrabi, who has also spent many years in jail, but currently serving 3 years with Sophie Fahmida and Nahida Nasreen. Or a journalist, Asif Sultan, who has been in jail for 2 years while his 2.5-year-old baby girl barely recognizes him. And when we talk about human rights violations, we must talk about the cause, Indian occupation. We must talk about our demands of azadi, the right to self-determination. Now, when we have such information available to us, we must also make it relatable to the audience we seek to influence. I often interact with people from various nationalities in the UK, US, UN, OIC, different institutions, whenever lobbying them, they usually relate certain cases and issues to historical or current events, such as Srebrenica, or the Rohingya, or of course the obvious one, Palestine. Mirroring causes, cases, subjects that people can relate to should be a major strategy to lobby and educate the people around us. We must be able to counter the RSS right-wing fascist fundamentalist government and their publications that glorify Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany. We should be able to counter the propaganda that is being used by the Indian government to delegitimize the people of Kashmir, the activists of Kashmir, and the cause of Kashmir. We have MPs, we have, in America, I guess you call them senators and congressmen, but members of parliament, members of the institutions that you should be able to lobby and tell them various different case stories. There are many, many media reports, published reports by international agencies such as the United Nations Human Rights the Human Rights Commissioner for the United Nations. You have Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch. There are so many various different, so much material that exists that we should be able to present to different people to lobby them. And it really is not that hard. It takes time. Everything takes time. If Rome was not built in a day, then Kashmir will not be free overnight either. Thank you very much.
We bleed like everybody else. We bleed like you. And I plead with you, support us.
आजादी सौदा ना करना आजादी सौदा ना करना आजादी अगर शहीद हुआ तो आजादी अगर शहीद हुआ तो आजादी मेरे कफन पे लिखना आजादी मेरे कफन पे लिखना आजादी जब दफन करोगे आजादी जब दफन करोगे आजादी मेरे कब्र पे कहना आजादी मेरे कब्र पे कहना आजादी जब घर आओगे आजादी जब घर आओगे आजादी मेरे बच्चों से कहना आजादी MC ना बनना आजादी पीढ़ी ना बनना आजादी मुकद्दर ना बनना आजादी.
Thank you so much, Brother Thakur, for your strength and your wisdom and for sharing those action items with us. We'll be posting some links to where people can go to take action in Europe. As we move on with the program, I would like to now invite a very strong woman, someone who's on the ground, who sees and bears witness to the atrocities that are taking place. It is my great pleasure to welcome Sister Shahana Butt, who is a journalist who was born and brought up in Kashmir, Srinagar. She has a master's degree in communications and journalism from the University of Kashmir and started her career with the Press TV. Shahana Butt has made documentaries on Kashmir and India and is joining us from Srinagar, Kashmir. She'll be talking about challenges Kashmiri reporters face. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for the invitation. First of all, assalamu alaikum to all of you and all the viewers. It is definitely, I would say, an opportunity to connect to Kashmir diaspora and those people who are interested to know Kashmir's story and to know Kashmir more through the people who are working on ground, through the people who know the stories much better and who have a better vision and sight of the happenings in Kashmir. Yes, definitely. I'm born and brought up in Kashmir, that too in an environment where my parents would never raise me as somebody who belongs to India or somebody who belongs to Pakistan. I was definitely raised as somebody with a strong identity that I am a Kashmiri. And wherever I would go, I would definitely speak tales about my place because I never had any such thing in mind. Yes, definitely. When I would go to the school and I would see a lot of security personnel and security forces guarding the streets. I would see bunkers. I would see concrete wires. I would see guns surrounding me. I would definitely question my father, like, what's all this? And definitely to make better sense, not to have more impact on my psyche, he would definitely say, "Oh, it's nothing. It's just they're just guarding. It's just security forces." Eventually, I grew up as a person who would always support Indian cricket team, who would always support India. I would consider it a country with great thought, with great people, with great democracy, and whatnot. I would always praise India wherever I would go. I would always stand in support of India, even my school or college days. So that is how I always made up my mind when it comes to Kashmir and when it comes to India. But eventually, when I landed in a university, of course, my vision broadened. And when I landed in university, and I would always be questioned, like, why am I supporting India? Am I not aware what's happening in Kashmir? I would say definitely I was not aware what is happening in Kashmir because I was isolated from this entire environment. Even the newspapers were not even allowed in our homes because my father would never allow any psychological impact on our brains. But when I landed working in the field, I would always question: is it that great democracy that I was supporting for ages and ages? So when I started my career, my first story was about the trade that was opened between the two divided Kashmirs. So before I could do my story, I started crying on exactly the line of control because I saw a bridge that was dividing people, that was dividing hearts. So it gave me a setback that where am I living and what part of the world is this where people are divided just because the two countries are not happy with each other. The big bosses of the two countries are not happy with each other. Whatever has happened in the past is history, or whatever fracture happened in the history should not impact the present. But what I saw was divided families crying on one side, a wailing cousin on the other side, the wailing uncle, just trying to see each other's face. And many people there even told us tales that many of their relatives died on the other side and they were not even able to attend their last rites. So all of a sudden, the image started changing. And of course, the dent on the mind was fresh and it started accumulating because in 2008, when I joined my work, I saw a lot of bloodshed in Kashmir. I saw a lot of innocent blood being spilled in Kashmir. Well, the reason was very simple, and the country like India could have dealt it in a much decent and delicate way, because in 2003, when there was a ceasefire agreement between India and Pakistan, situation had turned wonders between the two countries. And in Kashmir also, we could see there was a lot of change in the behavior. Even the rebellious groups were a little sidelined, and they were in talking terms, and there were negotiations, back channel talks happening. But what happened in 2008 was very strange, and I think it was really a mishandling of the situation. In 2008, I had just started my university, and I started my job immediately when I was in university. So a land was transferred to a Hindu shrine, which people of Kashmir disagreed to, because Kashmir those days was a territory that belonged to only and only people of Kashmir. So the Article 370 that is being hyped and talked about was an article that would always safeguard the people of Kashmir. So 2008 was the beginning when Article 370 and 35A were discussed threadbare, and people took to streets. It was a mass revolt. And what I saw on Indian news channels was a total opposite of what was happening in Kashmir and what was reported about Kashmir. I would not say that something is correct or something. I'm not nobody to judge. But yes, when you are feeding your own citizens a wrong image of Kashmir and Kashmir's struggle and Kashmiri people, definitely that country and that citizenry is definitely not going to support the people of Kashmir. But yes, of course, I know that citizenry of India is responsible, and if shown the correct picture, they would definitely support the people of Kashmir. So 2008 was the beginning of my reporting career. It has been a hell tough job for me to report because I was the only woman who would report for a TV channel, and that too, I had to work late night because there was no internet connectivity. That's always been a problem with Kashmir. So eventually, I grew up reporting those reports that have never been reported or are being reported like under the carpet, or being reported in such a way that the true picture doesn't come out. But yes, definitely a plus point was there that I was working for an international TV, and I was welcome to speak. I won't say. I would say the balanced side of the story. Yes, definitely, I was given a chance to speak the truth, the balance. I was able to hit the balance. But yes, definitely, there are many times that I would censor myself considering where I'm standing. Like just now, Brother Muzammil was talking about loudly about Azadi and other things. There is no denial to the fact what people of Kashmir want. There's no denial to what people of Kashmir have been demanding. There's no denial to what the sentiments have been, because I have reported on ground and I know very well, like, how the sentiments have grown over the years. In past 10 plus years, I see the graph of sentiments has grown up rather than going down, because New Delhi completely failed to win over the hearts of the people in Kashmir, because each and every time people of Kashmir shunned the violent ways and they took the streets unarmed, they were still killed. Whether they were armed, they were killed. Whether they were unarmed, they were killed. Unfortunately, the problem with me as a journalist at the moment is now that I would love always to speak the truth about Kashmir, but how far does that truth reach? That is the point. Like, Kashmir diaspora has been working really hard every year to speak about Kashmir, but why is international community so silent about Kashmir? That is my question. Like, is it really tough to deal with India when it comes to the rights of the people? Rights of the people, as in, I mean, like basic human rights. People of Kashmir today are looking for dignity. Like, my 10 years of experience say that evenly, and lots and lots of number of youngsters, especially the educated youths, are taking up arms in Kashmir. Nobody is questioning New Delhi. Why is it happening? Why is there a revival of insurgency in Kashmir? Like, if we talk about Pakistan as a stakeholder, I would not say that Pakistan has done something great or Pakistan has not done something. But yes, I would say that Pakistan has always tried to beat the drum and it has always blown its trumpet. But how successful has that trumpet blowing been? It's questionable. And why the international community is silent, we all know that there are interests, economic interests, both with India and Pakistan, and it's like keeping the pot boiling. But unfortunately, who thinks about millions of Kashmiris who are suffering on a daily basis? Even now, I joined this meeting late just because I have a 2G service working. I do not have access to good internet service. I mean, this is at least a basic human right that I deserve as a journalist. So reporting anything, it goes through at least 10 sensors inside my mind. When I write about Kashmir, when I speak about Kashmir, it's not at all easy, especially after 2019, August 5, things have changed. Media policy has changed. Until and unless you do not have a government source to talk about the numbers or talk about something that's concerning Kashmirian society, your report is false. You cannot prove your report. So reporting incidents in Kashmir has become hell difficult. Even if you write a post on Facebook, many of my fellow journalists have been summoned to police stations and face harassments just because they reported, I would say, truth. So does the truth has a cost in Kashmir? Things are turning really bad now. Like my friends here said, like Mirza said, like Muzammil said, things in Kashmir are not easy as they have been earlier. Things in Kashmir have turned, especially the BJP government has come into power. It isn't easy for any Kashmiri to speak. But what people of Kashmir at the moment are demanding, like, I know people in Kashmir because I meet them on a daily basis. I try and go report. even if they have a truth, they try to hide it. They would not prefer to speak in front of media because there's a lot of fear that is into the society, because there's a lot of policing happening after August 5, 2019. The way New Delhi actually scuttled the voices of Kashmiris, scuttled the people who always would pour onto streets to protest and demand for their rights. All of a sudden, everything changed. Youngsters would come onto streets, sometimes pelt stones or would protest loud and clear. But things changed just because of the heavy crackdown that New Delhi came up with. All said and done, whatever New Delhi did, but that doesn't mean that basic human rights of Kashmiris should be at stake. The world is responsible and should seek answers from New Delhi that whatever has been happening in Kashmir, what about the basic human rights? Why aren't people allowed to live? Like, silence is deadly in Kashmir. Like, if you see since August 5, silence it's loud and clear. I have never seen Kashmir so silent the way it is now. So this silence is disastrous. Youth in Kashmir have suicidal tendencies, frustrations, businesses are gone, everything is gone. So what is it? Like, if you say the Article 370 is gone, just to mainstream Srinagar or just to mainstream Jammu and Kashmir with the rest of India, where is the streamlining happening? Where is this mainstreaming happening? Like it's promised, there will be economic packages. While the rest of India during COVID lockdown received an economic package, what about the entrepreneurs and businesses of Kashmir? They received nothing. So if you're talking about economy, if you're talking about equal rights, if you're talking about justice, if you're talking about equality, where is that? These are the questions that I would like the world to ask New Delhi, that what is happening in Kashmir? Why is there a silence? And why are not people allowed to speak freely? I mean, of course, if you look at the records and if you look at the studies, more than 80% of the population has symptoms of depression. I mean, what sort of a life are people of Kashmir living? This is the time when the world is suffering from a pandemic. And in this pandemic, even the administration, the government is playing blindfold games and is not giving any sort of answers to the people, where people expect that government should be answerable to their questions. There is no government. There is nobody to answer their plight. There's nobody to look into the matters. So the problem, where the problem lies at the base, is that New Delhi is not giving any response to any international plea, be it international organizations, be it the United Nations or Pakistan's pleas. So it is a kind of a chaotic situation where millions of people are suffering. And journalists, if you talk about, there is a lot of surveillance, and there's no question that a journalist will be able to freely report. And even if a journalist tries to report, then preferably he does not want to be named. Otherwise, journalists would do anything to get a byline. But now, reporting a Kashmir story, you would prefer not to give your byline, because next day or next morning, you will have surveillance, 20 or 30 questions to be asked. And yes, I could see that many of our fellow journalists were questioned in such a way that it created an impact on us and our families, our fraternity. Our families started questioning and telling us why to do such a job where the life is at risk. Everybody will have to pay. So it is not easy to live in Kashmir. For the Kashmir diaspora living outside Kashmir, yes, you can raise your voice because you are living in an atmosphere which is free and allows you to fight for equality, human rights, and so many things. But when you talk of Kashmiris in Kashmir, there's a lot of surveillance happening, be it your social media, be it your phone lines being tapped, or be it your communication with anybody. So the question remains that how successful we would be in bringing the two countries, India and Pakistan, closer to not, I would say, not negotiate, but to resolve the matter amicably, where the people of Kashmir will be given equal chance, the way people of India are given, the people of Pakistan are given, like the way they are living, the way they are enjoying their democracies, the way they're enjoying development, they're enjoying their education sectors are growing, their economy is growing, like health sectors are growing. So Kashmiris equally demand the same thing. So the point that I want to make is that we know things have happened in Kashmir and are happening in Kashmir, but how will we as people help contribute, bring the two nations and the world, involve the world in resolving the matter amicably, and consider that people of Kashmir deserve to live with dignity and they deserve justice. The only thing that India needs to be held answerable at this point, we know that government estimates say more than 50,000 people have died because of the conflict in Kashmir. Non-government estimates say more than 100,000 people have died. So let's not go back to the estimates. Now let's look forward at what should be the modus operandi of people who are actively involved in discussing Kashmir. What should we do so that New Delhi at least comes to address the basic issues of people of Kashmir? That is life of dignity. Their identity is at the stake. The silence that we see in Kashmir is just because the identity of Kashmiris is at stake. Because to everything today a Kashmiri says, like this is a Kashmiri word and every Kashmiri would relate to it, they would say, sorry Moklio, means everything is finished. Means they do not consider themselves living. They say, today or tomorrow, now we should take care of our graveyards only. That's only ours. And tomorrow there will be big buildings on them. So is this what New Delhi has raised the identity of Kashmiris while calling them the equal citizenaries of India? Is this what you're giving them? Where is the sense of satisfaction and where is the sense of security for the people of Kashmir? This is the question that everybody needs to ask India, that even if you intend to streamline or mainstream Kashmir, where are you leading Kashmir? It's like it's moving towards a place where there will be no return, because tomorrow when you're issuing lots of domicile certificates, tomorrow, if at all, after 20 or 30 years, there'll be a sort of plebiscite, that too when New Delhi agrees to it. Definitely, there's not going to be any Muslim population, so there is going to be a change in status quo. So I would say there are questions like Public Safety Act that needs to be discussed. There are people who are languishing in jails. Like we are not given, like as a journalist, we're not given access to the jails. So there are many questions that we all need to discuss and put forward in front of those world leaders who definitely have a say in the world regarding these matters, and convince both India and Pakistan that people of Kashmir need to live in dignity. They deserve a life of dignity, because 70 years, a lot of bloodshed, 30 years of tremendous struggle, and now their silence should not be misinterpreted with something like, oh, they have given up. It's not like they have given up. The thing is that they are tired and they do not know who to fight, because it is such a huge military and a huge country. As we can see that despite New Delhi said that they are mainstreaming Kashmir, where in India do you see 700,000 or 500,000 troops? Do you? No. Our children often witness security forces. They witness security surveillances. They witness checkposts. Where in India do you witness that? So India needs to work out on all these things. Otherwise, of course, New Delhi is giving a clear signal that it is taking a path that Israel once took when it took over Palestine.
Thank you so much for everything that you have shared with us, and your courage for speaking up, and especially reporting from Kashmir. And as a woman journalist, kudos to you, and we hope we can amplify your voice around the world. I just have an action item to share from friends at the Kashmir Reading Group, which is a collective of Kashmiri lawyers, journalists, activists, and academics. They're going to release a yearly report titled Disintegration at Gunpoint. It covers all legal, political, and economic changes that have taken place in this last year. The report will go live on the pages of Kashmir Reading Group on 4th of August in the evening at 8:30 Kashmir time, 4 p.m. BST, and 8 p.m. PKT. So we're sharing the links to their Facebook page, Instagram, and Twitter on our chat, and we'll be sharing that on our Twitter as well. And please read this report. These are Kashmiri voices. The report is done by Kashmiris for Kashmiris.
Thank you, Hannah, for that action item. Now we have with us Ahmed bin Qasim, who will be speaking on the topic of Kashmir freedom, a dream of my family. Ahmed bin Qasim is a writer and a spoken word artist. He is the son of political prisoners Ashiq Hussain Faktu and Asia Andrabi. Faktu is one of the longest serving political prisoners in occupied Kashmir. Ahmed was born in Sringrar and he is currently pursuing international relations and political science. We welcome Ahmed to this rally and we pray for the release of his family. Ahmed?
Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Bismillah, Bismillah.
So my topic is about freedom, a cherished goal of my family. I was 2 months after my birth. I don't have any memories of it, of course, but 2 months after my birth, my father was detained. So, we grew up in hideouts, and when you grow up as a child in Kashmir, and you have a father in jail or you have a mother in jail, when it comes to a child, it's difficult for a child to understand why someone would be jailed just for speaking truth or just for doing the right thing. So I remember at times when things used to get difficult, I used to, go to my mother and I used to ask her why exactly is father in prison, and she would try and tell me, see, he did the right thing and he rose up against a tyrant and that's why he's in jail. But it did not make sense to me because as a child you think that jails or graveyards, jails in general, it's a place that is reserved for criminals. It's a place that is reserved for murderers and rapists and thieves. It's not a place for someone who just did the right thing. And my brother used to come in and he used to tell me, see, he's in jail for not doing his homework. And it made sense to me because I thought that, okay, that's something that's not good, and maybe that is why he deserves imprisonment. And I remember this one time when I was really thinking about him and really missing him. I deliberately skipped my homework, thinking that maybe this is the only way I could be with him. Maybe this is the only way I could get to spend time with him. But as you grow up in a place like Kashmir, as time passes, you realize that. And I learned this from my father. I went up to him and I told him, see, why is our life so abnormal? Why do I have to come see you? Or I have to see my mother at times in prison. Why is it like that? Why can't we have a normal life? Why can't we have a normal home? Why can't I have normal days and nights where you are by my side, guiding me? And I remember my father laughing and he said, with a smile on his face, he said, our life is very normal. It's how it should be. And I was agitated. I was angry. I thought he was not being sensitive enough towards what I was telling him or towards my pain as a child. But as you grow up, you realize that in a place like Kashmir, in a colonized territory, slavery is abnormal. Resisting it is very normal. And living happily or living a life of joy or being, being carefree, living under slavery for fighting against it. I mean, I think that that is more normal. And this is something that you realize it's not possible for you to understand this as a child, but as you grow up, you tend to understand this. You start thinking of yourself as as not just a son or a sister or a mother, but you start thinking of yourselves as a Kashmiri, as a Muslim Kashmiri who is part of a large society that is facing occupation. And this is how it was. I mean, you also realize that appealing to the humanity of the occupier has never worked, and it never will, because I remember when I was 6 or 7, and we expected father to be released when he completed his 14 years of imprisonment. And I thought he would be home. I thought 14 years is a long time. And it was the Indian state and the Indian courts that had ruled that he would be released after completing 14 years of imprisonment. But that did not happen. And then they stretched his imprisonment sentence to 20 years, and then they stretched it to death. And then you realize that living under occupation, living under colonialism, there is no rule of law. That happens even right now when my mother calls me. I remember that when my mother calls me, the allowed time, the permitted time for talking to her is 10 minutes. But just after we start talking, a minute passes or 2 minutes passes. 2 minutes pass. You have this lady policewoman reminding my mother of the fact that that time is running out. And she's constantly telling her that, see, your time is up, your time is up. And it is in moments like these that you understand the humiliation and the degradation that comes with the life of slavery, where I am not as entitled, or where the Indian state and the occupational regime is more entitled to my mother than I am. And when I used to go see father, I used to remember that the duration of our hugs, even that was controlled by the state, right? You hug for a few seconds and then the policeman would tell you, see, it's time to separate. That's it. So I think it's important for us to understand as people the first step towards liberation azadi's understanding and believing and internalizing the fact that there is no other alternative to it. And I think this is the first step. We need to be sure and certain that we are doing the right thing, that we are seeking the right thing. And I think that's really important. And I remember this one time I I went to see my father, and I told him that how I don't even know you very well. I don't know what you like. I don't know what you dislike. And there and the life under colonialism, it's different. You feel happiness, or you find happiness in different things, in strange things. And I remember that my father, when he was in prison, he was doing his MPhil, and then he did his PhD in prison. And he used to read books, and after finishing every book, he used to send it to our home. And after 27 years of his imprisonment, we have a library at our home. And these books, uh, they are how I know my father. And my father used to read them, and then he used to highlight the parts that he wanted me to ruminate on, that he wanted me to think about. And then I used to have those books, and I remember that I used to draw them near my face, and then try to see if they bear the scent of my father. And I used to read those highlighted parts, and that is how I came to know my own father. And while suffering has been there right since the day I was born, but we are not passive victims. We are not people who are just mere victims. We are not passive victims. We are not people who
Sorry, we seem to be having.
just mere victims. We don't freeze our identity in 5 other women who are in prison. All these, yeah,
Go ahead, Ahmed.
yeah. So my father, he's not the only man who's in jail. I mean, there are people who have been in prison for 15 years, 20 years, 25 years. And then my mother is not the only woman who is in prison. There are 5 other women who are in prison. And you should keep in mind that these women also have families back home who are waiting for them. And in a conflict zone and in a place like Kashmir, it's very easy. While it may seem that for someone like me, it's difficult to be grateful, it's difficult to see things positively, but that's not how it is. And there's this incident that I would share with you. I remember this parent teacher meeting that I had once, and I could not take my father with me there. And I was really frustrated. So my uncle, he accompanied me. And so everyone in the school, they used to come up to me and tell me, is he your father? And I had to tell them, no, he's not my father. And then they used to ask about him. It was all very difficult. But then this one time, I was really frustrated. I came back home and I ran up to my mother. She was in the guest room, and I hugged her, and she told me. And there was this boy and his mother. They were sitting beside my mother, and my mother asked me to meet this boy, and she told me to befriend him. And I asked her who this boy was, and my mother told me that he's Ghalib. And I looked at him, and he greeted me with a smile that I still don't forget. And I looked at this boy who, at least I have my father, he's alive. And I don't get to see him. I don't get to have a meal with him. But I have this comfort that he is alive, and his freedom and the freedom of my mother and all the prisoners, their freedom is intertwined with the freedom of Kashmir. I mean, I have come to realize that they can't be free now as India moves faster, and it has always been, but as India moves faster and faster towards being a complete fascist dispensation, it's hard to imagine them being free without Kashmir being free. So my topic is the dream of freedom as a family, and I will tell you that for me, my father would be free when Kashmir is free, and this is a reality that I have come to accept. And so I was telling you about Ghalib, and he greeted me with a smile that I still don't forget. And I looked at this boy, and I paused for a second. I thought about it. Now, here's a boy whose father is not alive. Here's a boy who does not even have a hope that he can cling to. Here's a boy who does not even have a chance at seeing his father, a chance at listening to his father. And for a second, I felt grateful. Even if my father was in prison, I felt grateful because there is always someone who has suffered more than you in Kashmir. And I think this is something that really becomes a source of hope for you as people. And as victims of Indian oppression, I think this is a great source of hope for you if you face oppression or if you have to make a sacrifice for the sake of cause. And it has, and I remember this one time.
We're having a little bit of a tech issue. I believe we'll play some chants from documentaries that have been filmed on Kashmir now.
Are we less than humans? Are we animals that deserve this? Are we not part of that ummah? Do we not count? We bleed like everybody else. We bleed like you. And I plead with you, support us.
सौदा ना करना सौदा ना करना अगर शहीद हुआ तो अगर शहीद हुआ तो मेरे कफन पे लिखना मेरे कफन पे लिखना जब दफन करोगे मेरे कब्र पे कहना मेरे कब्र पे कहना जब घर आओगे मेरे बच्चों से कहना MC ना बनना PDP ना बनना मुकद्दर ना बनना.
Okay, next up, we're going to invite Shaista Safi on the stage. Shaista is going to be speaking about how global activism can impact the Kashmiri issue. Shaista Safi is a refugee from occupied Kashmir who settled in the United Kingdom. She's a human rights activist with the Kashmir Institute of International Relations. She joined YFK as a program manager and lobbyist on the Kashmir cause. It's our great pleasure to welcome Shaista to the rally.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Hina, for having me. Thank you, Mr. President, for being with us and hearing to all these testimonies from people from the ground. I was not going to talk about, I was not going to deviate from my topic, but when Ahmed spoke, every memory, every childhood memory came into my mind. My mother protecting me hiding me under her cloak, telling me everything is all right, while I could feel her heart race at 1,000,000 miles per hour, trying to peek out of her cloak. I distinctly remember Indian military, armed to the teeth, ransacking our home, destroying our property, and torturing my family members and neighbors. To this day, I can still feel the vibrations of destruction and the smell of weapons and the sound of wailing. And when Ahmed was talking, I could feel every word he said. Or even when Shahana was talking, or Muzammil testified, or Brother Saib Mirza Beg said all these things. So the narrations from people from the ground, they touch heart because they actually are from the heart. Coming to the topic, in the present world, when we see bias becoming the policy, a slogan become a movement, and even a hashtag into a political campaign drive, we have seen Arab Spring, the Orange Revolution, the Maidan protest, the Cedar Revolution, Brexit. We saw Occupy Wall Street, the Tea Party, and the most recent Black Lives Matter. In conventional sense, not every one of the movement has succeeded. In fact, most have not, at least not yet. But one thing that is common is power of citizens, which is the root of activism. Whether the activists are working alone or organizing bigger and bigger groups of people or organizations harnessing people's power. Kashmir had its own Arab Spring, and Shahana talked about it, that in 2008 and in 2010, if I don't go back in history and stick to the recent one, people were on roads, political activists and leaders were active, protests were carried out every day, youth was leading against the agreement to transfer the many acres of forest land to Amarnath Shrine Board. Kashmiri on ground were doing everything to record their protest. Still, one important thing was missing. As news from home was not coming out, not much was translated into the movement outside Kashmir. Once again, rise in global activism on Kashmir was seen in 2016 after Burhan Muzaffarwani was martyred, when Kashmir was put under strict lockdown and we were unable to reach our families in Kashmir. International news agencies, watchdogs, diaspora, everyone was on their toes. And then again, we saw Kashmir fading away from the main news again and again. And then again, after August, 5th August 2019, when Kashmir was turned from de facto occupation to de jure occupation by illegal annexation and influx of several 100,000 more occupational forces, whole Kashmir was turned into prison once again. And again, activism on Kashmir took speed. The huge protest I saw and witnessed outside Indian High Commission in London was the biggest I saw in my whole life for Kashmir. So global activism is there for Kashmir, be it political activism, legal, community organizing, non-violent direct actions, demonstrations, marches. Even women are vocal now about Kashmir. We saw Shahana speaking from the conflict zone. Youth is getting involved. We saw Ahmed speaking about his family. Case studies are coming out from Kashmir. We have the facts and figures, not complete, but still we have. So people are working even with the power corridors as well. Reports that exist do not just come from or happen in a vacuum. Human rights reports such as by United Nations, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Physicians of Human Rights, and Doctors Without Borders, even we have the foundation laid by our elders. Let's not go into how successful they have been, or but we have the experience they have. So we do not have to reinvent the wheel or start from the scratch. What we need is a sense of urgency, ownership of this cause, a unified strategy, and most importantly, the consistency. If not you and me, someone else is going to speak, and going to speak in our voice, on our turf, and often against our interest. Recently, we saw fake Kashmiris appearing from nowhere and propagating Indian narrative and especially fascist Hindutva narrative. They have been using vilification methods against real Kashmiris, and now they are doing it in a very systematic manner. We saw allegations from them against Hurriyat leaders. our human rights activists, defenders, our journalists, and even against the rights activists in diaspora. Even on our panel today, Muzammil has been a victim. And just yesterday, as he even mentioned, that social media campaign against Atazia was seen too. We may have differences in our community. We can criticize and even level allegations against each other. But the moment our enemy attacks even one of us, we will stand by our comrade. And the reason for that is the global discourse on Kashmir. We must at least look united, even if we are not. If we don't have, it is a quote that if we don't have the power to attack the enemy, we should at least have the minds to attack their strategy. And their clear strategy right now is to create divide, discredit activists, correct the assassination, and change of the narratives. For larger impact, for larger global impact, we have to be careful from selective activism. Especially, there are many Indians who show solidarity with Kashmir on human rights violations carried out by India. But when it comes to our right of self-determination, they show their real colors by being patriotic Indians. The biggest responsibility on diaspora is narrative building. Yes, we talk about human rights violations. Yes, we talk about environment, talk about gender, child rights, unemployment, economic loss in tourism. Anything that helps these separately is like a band-aid. And we are not looking for band-aids. We are looking for the cure of cancer, and the cancer is of occupation. For further global impact, we need to reach out to other causes and find common grounds. So we can build a network. A few days back, I was in a webinar with activists from Azerbaijan, and the lady from Azerbaijan narrated the similar case studies and stories as we have in Kashmir. Palestinians, whenever we meet and wherever we meet, they resonate with us. Bosnian mothers, they look like our mothers in Kashmir and have similar stories. We can have impact when we have allies, not just outside, but inside our community as well. Sharing knowledge, pooling resources, sharing each other's burdens, supporting each other in time of distress, and making sure to strengthen each other's voices. Listening to Ahmed, I'm sure, and I promise that we'll continue to fight. We will continue to resist. We will continue to try to defeat aggression, every lie in their propaganda, every political and diplomatic maneuver. Many smalls can always overwhelm the big if we get activated. And today and tomorrow and even yesterday, we were all activated, and we have to activate for Kashmir. Thank you all.
Thank you, Shaista, for being so eloquent and for your advocacy and being on the front lines all your life. Thank you so much. We appreciate you and value your voice. We have put down some diaspora actions that people can do in the chat. For example, some of the things that were shared were meeting political representatives of your country and talking to them about the Kashmiri conflict, protesting in your cities, billboard banners, as well as Twitter storms. There are other people have recommended fasting for Kashmir, pushing the OIC, pushing your elected officials, especially if you're in Muslim countries, to speak up for Kashmir and not let this issue die down. The pressure has to be there. Okay, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We're going to move on to our next speaker. Inshallah, Sister Athar, Dr. Athar Zia. It's my great honor and pleasure to invite Dr. Athar Zia to be on the panel today. She will be speaking about violations of women's rights in Kashmir. Athar Zia is a PhD. She's a political anthropologist, poet, short fiction writer, and a columnist. She teaches at the University of Northern Colorado, Greeley. Athar is the author of Resisting the Disappearance, Military Occupation, and Women Activism in Kashmir, which was just released in June 2000, last year in June 2019. She's also the co-editor of Resisting Occupation in Kashmir, published by UPenn in 2018, and A Desolation Called Peace, in May 2019. She's published a poetry collection, The Frame, in 1999, and another collection is forthcoming. Uthar's ethnographic poetry on Kashmir has won an award from the Society of Humanistic Anthropology. She's the founder and editor of Kashmir Literature and the co-founder of Critical Kashmir Studies Collective, an interdisciplinary network of scholars working on the Kashmir region. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Uthar.
Thank you so much, Hannah, and thank you to everyone for being on this panel and also marking this very important incident that happened a year back. Important in the sense that it kind of rejuvenated and revitalized us all. For the last 1 decade, we had been trying to carve this niche to have a critical Kashmir studies sub-discipline be rooted. I mean, it could be founded in the East as well, but we decided to come to West because we felt like, and not just me, but most of my colleagues, most Kashmiris who gave up their professions, gave up their jobs, and came here, went all across the globe to study Kashmir in depth. Because when you're in Kashmir, you cannot really work on Kashmir. Being in Kashmir is imprisonment in itself. There are prisons, and we've heard stories of Kashmiris who are incarcerated, but at the same time, all Kashmiris are incarcerated in one way or the other. It's called the world's most beautiful prison, and that is what it is. And I salute my comrades and my sisters and brothers, especially Shahana, who spoke earlier. It's incredibly brave of her to be speaking from on ground, considering what's happening to journalists, and speaking as she did. I really was overwhelmed by her courage. So the topic that has been given to me is talking about violations and talking about women and gender. I feel like we already have lay of the land. We have talked about sexual violence. We've talked about, Muzammil gave a good idea of what's happening and what has been happening for the past 33 years, which is direct violence. But then we also do not have to forget that Kashmiris have been undergoing this violation for the last 72 years. And when we mark the date of 1989, I feel like we really, really have to underline the fact that this has been going on even before 1989. Kashmiris in every decade, in every phase, have shown resistance from 1947 onwards. And they have risen up in whatever capacity and form. In the 60s, there was already an armed movement, but in the 70s and the 50s, 60s and 70s and 80s, there have been different phases of Kashmiri struggle, both armed, unarmed, intellectual. So I think that's very important to say and kind of delineate for the rest of the world, because at this moment, what we are trying to do is we are fighting a war of information mainly. We are trying to tell the world. And I think that's what people of my generation who came to West deliberately to speak about Kashmir, to write about Kashmir, volunteer to do this kind of work, even though everyone was having cushy jobs, everyone was having a life that they could have led without any issues. So I feel like that needs to be said, that this movement is not just 1989, but this movement goes back to 1947 and even beyond. And that's what Critical Kashmir Studies does, is to revisit that history, which has been narrativized in a way that it becomes that India is the benefactor for Kashmiris. It's the largest democracy. We have to make sure that the world knows that India has played the politics of democracy inside Kashmir. It is not a democracy. The foundation of democracy inside the foundations that India presents to the rest of the world, it's an illicit democracy. The United Nations called the very first elections that were held inside Kashmir as out of order. They were not the elections that should be held in a disputed territory. And we have to remind the world of that. Because what has happened in the last 72 years is that there is this hegemonic narrative, because so much has been written in India, and kind of we have been told, Kashmiris have been told that this is how you think about what has happened to you. Not that Kashmiris bought that, but what actually happened was that the rest of the world bought that as UN was sidelined. And I think what has happened since 2008, and everyone brought that date forth in their speeches and in their talks, is the revitalization and re-internationalization, not internationalization, because Kashmir is already an international dispute, but re-internationalization of Kashmir that has happened in the last 1 decade. And I think August 5th has lent it more impetus. And I think this is the momentum that we have to catch. Now, going back to thinking about women, I do want to draw your attention to a couple of points. One is that what kind of space do women, Kashmiri women, inhabit in this resistance movement? And when we think about that, right now we see a lot of vocal women around. We see them putting their lives at risk, putting their families at risk, putting their jobs at risk, trying to write about Kashmir, trying to speak about Kashmir. So we do have to very deliberately think about their niche, their role at the table, and I feel as a collective, we owe it to the people to the women on ground. We have the human rights movements, which wittingly and unwittingly, these activists like Parveena Ahangar that Muzammil earlier mentioned, who co-founded the Association for Disappeared Persons, looking for her son initially, just being an accidental activist, so to speak. But now she's become the voice of Kashmir. She has become the voice of the resistance of Kashmir. She's become what is now, she's now known as the Iron Lady of Kashmir. So that is the human rights movement that is really taking shape today. If you Google just the human rights movement in Kashmir, you will see faces of women come up. We do have to very deliberately, very consciously think about what kind of spaces are they inhabiting? Are we giving them the space that they require? Are we consciously recognizing their role, not just as just a person in the resistance movement, but as women in the resistance movement? Because I think that is also going to lend credibility to this resistance, because there is a great danger that Indian narrative has put on this movement as being this Islamic, for the lack of a better term, what is stereotyped as Islamic terrorism. And in that narrative, what happens, and I think we have to be very cognizant of the feminist literature that has come out from India in the last 15 years, where many women talk about Kashmiri women, where many Indian feminist scholars who otherwise are very keen on talking about human rights violations, but they are the first people to talk about the Kashmiri men who are the patriarchal men who are being oppressive to Kashmiri women. So it becomes like we have to save Kashmiri women kind of a narrative. So we have to be very cognizant of giving them the place, the women, their place, the place that they have so deservedly earned in the last 30 years. And even if we think about 1947 onwards, just thinking about Kanan Poshpora, the 1991 notorious mass rape case, which is yet to be solved. In 2014, I think 55 young women came together, and these are all young Kashmiri women who some of you saw in the documentary as well, and they came together and they started fighting this case in the courts. And now they have a movement called Justice for Kanan Poshpora. They even wrote a book. 5 of them got together. They wrote a book. And this is done on ground in Kashmir, knowing the risks that are attached to that kind of activism. And then filmmakers, journalists, as you just saw, writers, scholars, these are women who are coming forth, putting their lives at risk. And I feel like we have, as a movement of intellectuals, as a movement on ground, off ground, in diaspora, we have to start thinking about what is the gendered angle, where are we, how are we consciously sort of accepting women's gender resistance. So I think that's something very important. And then also the cognizance that I wanted to draw your attention to, the saving of Muslim women in the Indian feminist narrative. And in that, there is a very important thing that we all must consider, because, when they are saying that we have to save Kashmiri women from their men, they're also demonizing, they're doubly demonizing Kashmiri men. And I think that's very important to consider, that Kashmiri men have been demonized so much to an extent that they have become the killable bodies. You can kill a Kashmiri without remorse, as we saw in the case of Afzal Guru. He was killed for the collective conscience of the Indian nation. So you can actually kill a Kashmiri person and then no one can ask you questions. And that's what the AFSPA, the draconian law that has been imposed on Kashmir since 1991, that really outwardly manifests the Indian necropolitics, the politics of death that is being played inside as we speak at the moment. So I think we have to consider that we have to consider how are Kashmiri women also narrativized by Indians, and how are we treating them inside Kashmir, not just their resistance, their everyday resistance, but their day-to-day lives as well, because Kashmir women in every society, they are fighting patriarchies as well. So I feel like that there are parallel struggles going on, and there is a great danger that Indian feminists, many liberal feminists, they come in every now and then, and they treat these issues as issues as if they are pitted against the movement, and that becomes a great danger. And we have done some work last year. What we did was, when the Me Too movement happened, so there were some Me Too cases inside Kashmir as well. So our collective at that moment came out, and we issued a feminist statement where we said that these are parallel movements. Women have to face patriarchal situations, but we also have a military-industrial complex which is hegemonically patriarchal, which is also feminized Kashmiri men, so to speak. We have to face that as well. So how can we take these? How can we recognize women's issues, but at the same time not alienate them from their men, from their movement, and also recognize what women are doing inside the movement? Do I have time?
Yes, we're running out of time now, so we'd
just like to wrap up. I'm hoping there are more questions, but this is what I had to say to draw your attention that, one, we really need to be cognizant of how what the role women are playing, and whether we are accepting and also assimilating them organically into the movement, because that is the way forward, and that is the vision for the future. And then also, what kind of narratives are we presenting, so that we are not demonizing Kashmiri men further, and we are not making it seem as if Kashmiri women are these passive. And this happens all the time, even with the movement of APDP. Parveena was nominated for Indian of the Year some years back, and very recently something again happened which decontextualized her entire struggle, which is based on resistance of Kashmir. So those are the two things that I wanted to bring to your attention. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zia, and for your, we saw what happened yesterday on Twitter, and we're, all here in solidarity with you. Amina, please go ahead and introduce Brother Faiz.
Brother Faiz will be speaking on the Kashmiri children, an easy target of Indian aggression. The convener of All Parties Hurriyat Conference and a legal consultant of human rights. Thank you for being with us, and go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
Yes. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. First of all, my thanks and congratulations to the organizers of this event. Indeed, it will carry a good weight. And let me touch straight with the topic. You see, a simple question is what the people of the Kashmir are demanding. They are demanding their promised right to self-determination. In light of the UN resolutions, which are intact and enforceable, no doubt, India is misleading the international community about the validity of the UN resolutions. But it is a fact that these resolutions are intact and enforceable. In three situations, a UN resolution becomes invalid. First, if there is a period of time mentioned in the UN resolutions, and after the expiry of this fixed period, the time limit, the UN resolution will become infructuous, invalid. But so far as the resolution on Kashmir is concerned, there is no time framework. Therefore, it is valid. The second option is when parties to the dispute enter into an agreement, thereby they say we have resolved the issue and we don't need now the UN resolutions. In that case, when the UN resolution will become infructuous, then party will enter into an agreement. And this too with the endorsement of the Security Council. The third situation is when the United Nations passes the resolution cancelling the old one. This has not even happened in our case. Therefore, our resolutions on Jammu and Kashmir are valid and they are waiting for its implementation. It is in no way that one party, that is India, is calling UN resolutions old, infractuous. No, it is not the same. It is not the position. The principal party, the Kashmiris, they are demanding the implementation of the UN resolutions. And the second party, Pakistan, they are also demanding the implementation. But sadly, it is the India that is calling the UN recognized disputed territory as integral part of India. It is against the international law. And the Kashmir dispute have three most important dimensions. Number one, it is political dimension. That means it is a matter of, it is a question of right to self-determination. And the United Nations General Assembly has declared not once but several times that right to self-determination is as important as right to life. And the only demand of Kashmiris is the implementation of the UN resolution so that we could also free the fragments of peace and freedom in the region. The second is the human rights situation. The human rights violations are so massive and systematic that the government of India has framed draconian laws. If I may refer some of them, for example, Special Powers, Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Section 4A gives shoot to kill to the Indian Armed Forces. They can shoot to kill anyone at discretion without any fire orders. And Section 7 of the same act gives impunity. No suit can lie against an Indian soldier. This situation has drastically increased the human rights violations. You see, under the Indian occupied Kashmir, there was a law that the Kashmiri detainees can be jailed within the territorial jurisdiction of the Jammu and Kashmir. But Section 10 of the Act was changed, and a Kashmiri detainee can be detained in any jail of India, thousands of kilometers away, depriving him of the basic right of choosing a lawyer of his own choice, and thousands of kilometers away from the homeland. It is very difficult for the parents to find out their son where he is. For example, he goes to Andhra Pradesh to find out Andhra Pradesh Central Jail. Once his parent reaches there, they say, no, he's not there. He has not. We have learned he is in the Mumbai. Then he moves thousands of kilometers to Bombay. There they say, no, he's in some another state. This is the punishment before the court verdict against the basic rights of the detainees. And the third one, and I will again refer to law. It is called the Public Safety Act, under which Kashmiris are very frequently detained under this act. What is the definition? Section 7 says, you will be surprised to know how the laws have been, for inhuman laws are in practice. The act says, if the state has a reason to believe that any person may or is likely to do an act whereby the security of the state is threatened, he can be put in the prison for long 2 years. And you see the 2 years without any compensation. Tomorrow court says he is innocent. How we can compensate these 2 long years? This is a question. Confession before a police officer has been declared a valid confession. Before my speech, there was some lady speaking on the Afzal Guru, collective punishment. Yes. This was the statement, a confessional statement was obtained during the custody before a police officer from the Afzal Guru, and that was used. And even the Supreme Court said that there is nothing on record against the Afzal Guru, but he was hanged. Likewise, there is an universal law, burden of proof. It is reversed in our Kashmir. The accused has to prove that he is not guilty of offense. Identity of a witness can remain in secret. This has given birth to the fake trials. And besides these things, you see the 900,000 Indian troops are stationed in our homeland, making Kashmir the highest militarized zone in the world. One soldier is over 8 innocent Kashmiris. It is a threat to the regional peace and tranquility. And they are all involved in the genocide of the Kashmiris. 23 massacres have been committed by Indian forces in Indian occupied Kashmir, but thousands of people have been killed. Even the gunpowder has been used. Nowadays, the chemical weapons is in use. Houses are destroyed. They are burned down by the chemical weapons. The residential homes, Kashmir has become a huge prison where everyone is under arrest. There is no freedom of speech and expression. In the last month, the government of India has given a new media policy. It is the government. It is the will of the now government. They can declare any content against the government, and that can result in the closure of the media house and penal action against the journalist. Now, who will speak? This voice of the people will come to the public. There is no means. You see the freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, it's completely snatched. No visibility of freedom of expression. No one can speak. There is no newspaper that can cover any story. It is banned. Internet restrictions, lockdown, continuous from 5th of August, continuous under lockdown. Now the pandemic, and they are making use of this pandemic also. And the 5th of August 2019, what was the motive of the government of India? The sole motive was to change the demographic structure of the Jammu and Kashmir. And this demographic changes are to defeat the UN resolutions. And this is against the UN resolutions. These to change the demographics of the occupied Jammu and Kashmir is against the UN resolutions, against the international law, against the 4th Geneva Convention. You see, there is a clear law. It is the Article 49, subpara 6. It says the occupying power shall not deport or transfer its civilian population into the area under its occupation. And if they do so, 146 and 147 clearly says these are war crimes. And International Criminal Court, they endorsed this position under Article 8, subclass 2b, which says that this demographic change of an occupied territory is a war crime. But India is doing all this to change the demographics of the country. Our leaders, Mir Vice Dr. Umar Farooq, is under continuous illegal arbitrary arrest, house arrest. Sayyid Ali Shah Gilani, 94 years old, he is continuous under the house arrest, under military surveillance. So with the Mir Vice Umar Farooq. He is under house arrest. Strict military surveillance. Asia Andraibi, she is in the Tihar jail, detained, and now she has been shifted to the punishment cell. Muhammad Yasin Malik in the Tihar jail, Shabir Ahmad Shah in the Tihar jail, and Musarat Alam and others, all are in Indian jails at the Tihar jail and other in different jails of the India. And what is their fault? Those who are now in the Indian jails, they have been lodged with fabricated, concocted cases, and others, they are in the under the house arrest. India is committing heinous crimes against humanity in the occupied Kashmir. You see, the two reports of the United Nations Human Rights Council of 2018 and 19, they asked India permission of its UN team to visit Indian occupied Kashmir, but India says no. They are not giving any access. They are not giving any access to any international NGO. What is the reason? The reason is simple. There is something serious which India doesn't want the world to know. And what is that serious thing? It is the human rights violations, the systematic and the heinous crimes against humanity. That doesn't India want to know the world. Therefore, we, the civil society, must join, ask the peace-loving countries, the peace-loving people to come forward and raise voice in the name of the humanity and to save the humanity in Kashmir. With this, I once again thank you all.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for being here and for your voice, and our prayers are with you. Inshallah, now we'd like to have the president of Azad Kashmir, inshallah, be on our panel.
It's evening here and must be good afternoon there. So good afternoon, everybody in the United States. Can you hear me this time?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much.
Okay. My greetings to you from Azad Jammu and Kashmir. And first, I want to congratulate Mr. Abdul Malik Mujahid for this very, very good initiative. I would say that the presentations that were made were passionate, very compelling. And, you know, when I go around the world, usually Kashmiris, we are all Kashmiris from Azad Kashmir or the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, but Kashmiris from the other side of the line of control, they complain that these debates and discourses are dominated by the representatives from Azad Kashmir or Pakistan, and you see very little representation of the Kashmiri voices from the Valley of Kashmir or Jammu. But today, you have this representation from Kashmiris who were born in the occupied territory. And you heard their first-hand testimonies, very moving testimonies. The second point is that these testimonies were about real experiences of the people in the occupied territory. They lived under occupation. They recounted and recalled those experiences. So in that sense too, this is a unique initiative. I have never attended any other seminar, Dr. Mujahid, like this one. And I just want to give this feedback to you. So my congratulations to you and to your colleagues and this umbrella organization, which you call Justice for All. Yes, Kashmir is about justice. And therefore, the content of the debate today has been very enriching and very enlightening for me also. Now, let me tell you, you've given me 10 minutes, and if I exceed my time limit by 2 or 3 minutes, I'll apologize to you at the end of my conversation. So the struggle about Kashmir is a struggle about humanity. It is about justice. It is about human civilization. It is about the world order as it had been conceived last century. And when we look at the tragedy in Kashmir, as a matter of fact, it should be even, can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear some interruption, but can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, I'll continue. So I was saying that when you start analyzing Kashmir, of course, you give rational arguments and you give legal arguments, but basically, we have to feel Kashmir through our heart, because what is happening in Kashmir is heart-rending. I mean, you can't imagine that such atrocities, such monstrosities are happening in one part of the planet, and the entire planet is impassive, that it is not taking any action at all, that such a big population, such a big area is imprisoned, and there is no international intervention at all. And in fact, the most powerful nations, the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, and the Western countries which call themselves the custodians of humanitarian law and human rights, they're completely silent. And in fact, their silence is a dereliction of their obligation under the United Nations Charter, and their silence emboldens and encourages India to commit crimes with impunity and with absolute immunity from any kind of accountability. This is outrageous, and we have to change the situation. What is happening in Kashmir right now is colonization. What is happening in Kashmir right now is crimes against humanity, a slow-moving genocide, ethnic cleansing, war crimes, as previous speakers have elaborated. Every day, young men are targeted and killed in cordon and search and cordon death operations because they kill young men and they blast houses. And as Mr. Faiz Naqshbandi was talking about it a little earlier, transfer of population in the occupied territory is a crime against humanity. It's a war crime, according to international humanitarian law. And this is happening on a massive scale in front of the world's eyes. I mean, the United Nations is there. India has been elected as a member of the United Nations Security Council, and it would start its non-permanent term starting January the 1st, 2021. And yet, nobody is holding India accountable. Nobody is calling out India for its crimes against humanity. This is the kind of situation that we face today. Now, India forcibly and illegally occupied the territory on October the 27th, 1947. And since then, it has been brutalizing the people of Jammu and Kashmir. And I have done my counting, and I think that 500,000 Kashmiris have laid down their lives for liberty, for freedom, for self-determination in the past 73 years. And the killing continues and the martyrdom of Kashmiris continues. Now, how have Indians managed this? Of course, they occupied the territory, but at the same time, year after year, decade after decade, they've been relying on these political classes that they created, the artificial political classes, their allies, that they just crafted and used them. And because of the facilitation of these political leaders, or this political class, Kashmiris have been killed and maimed and tortured and blinded and forcibly disappeared and illegally arrested. And that's why you have an apocalypse in the land of Kashmir. And as it has been pointed out, that starting last year, India invaded and reoccupied the territory of Jammu and Kashmir and annexed it to the Indian Union, which is also a crime against humanity, which is a flagrant violation of Kashmiris' rights. But as it was pointed out, that they have also divided the territory into two union territories, which means that the people of Jammu and Kashmir are slaves, and they will have absolutely no say in the running of this occupied state. That the writ from Delhi would decide their future without the consent of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. So, and starting this year in April, under the cover of the COVID-19 pandemic, stealthily, during a night, as a matter of fact, they introduced these new domicile rules. And what are these new domicile rules? I mean, let me translate it for you. You know, you are all Kashmiris. You know it. That this means that Kashmiris' jobs and livelihoods and businesses would be stolen, that their land would be grabbed, and that this would be Lebensraum, and this would be settler colonialism, while the world is watching. And this is what is happening in Kashmir right now. And India tries to distract the attention of the world by violating the line of control, so that the world starts thinking that there's a conflict between two nuclear powers, and that could lead to a nuclear war, and therefore it tries to cover up its own crimes in the occupied territory. It also issues threats of war against Azad Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan. Last year, it also not only annexed the territory, but showed the occupied territory of Jammu and Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan and Azad Kashmir as part of the Indian Union. This was outrageous. Now, my topic was what kind of response we should give. I think one thing that I want to highlight is that starting last year, August the 5th, new doors were opened to the Kashmiris, to Kashmiri narrative, the true Kashmiri narrative, in the Western countries, and this was led by the Western media, also Western parliaments. For instance, this taboo that was there in the United States in Washington, D.C., that nobody could speak up against India. This taboo was broken last year because several hearings were held in the US House of Representatives and the US Senate. So the European Parliament was very vocal, and the United Kingdom spoke up. I would also like to inform you that 10 ASEAN, this Southeast Asian nations organization, these 10 members in their parliaments also established Friends of Kashmir groups. So there was this reaction against India, but this was ephemeral. It didn't last long. It lasted for only 3 months, August, September, and October. And then that wave died down because of Brexit, because of impeachment proceedings against President Trump, because of COVID-19. But that window is still there. And somebody was talking about the diaspora community, and I would say that the diaspora community, whether they are Kashmiris or Pakistanis, they're quite influential within the political circles, and they are economically viable. So I think that, I mean, all those suggestions which were made must be implemented. And it is mobile. It is, in fact, I mean, within the diaspora community, we should mobilize our younger councillors and younger political activists to influence decision-making within the political parties that they are associated with. So this will have an impact. I would also say that we have to continue to work on parliaments. Parliaments are receptive to your narrative. I've seen it in Brussels, in Strasbourg, in London, in Washington, D.C. Lawmakers are ready to listen to you, and they would not countenance continuously India's violations of human rights. One of the challenges that we have is that while the parliaments and the media and the international civil society has spoken up, the governments, the powerful governments, the permanent five that I refer to, with the exception of China and also other Western countries, they're silent because their strategic and economic interests are tied with India. And that's a barrier that has to be breached. And how would we do that? We would do that by enlisting the support of the international civil society. While talking to multiple audiences, I have said that we have to take this movement, which was started last year and which got this international reception, to the level of anti-apartheid movement or to the Vietnam movement. This is Kashmiris' Vietnam moment. And we have to either use it or lose it. Because, and the best tool in your hands is, I mean, today academics and political activists, they spoke, and the best tool in your hands is communication. And I was so deeply impressed by the articulate presentations by these Kashmiri participants of today's webinar, whether it was Saib Beg or whether it was Muzammal Thakur or whether it was all of them, as a matter of fact. And these were testimonies that were given. And I'm proud of all of you because what you said today in this webinar should be taken to the American audiences, to the international audiences, to the British audiences, and as somebody suggested, to the Muslim audiences within the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Let me tell you that the United Nations, unfortunately, has been sidelined in international decision-making. But even then, we should continue to go back to the United Nations Security Council, to the General Assembly, to the Human Rights Council, and to other international forums, because they are responsible for a just dispensation in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, because they have to enable the people of Jammu and Kashmir to exercise their right to self-determination. So India responds to only two things, as a matter of fact. Any occupier, any colonizer, any foreign occupier responds to only two things. Go back to the last century and look at how these colonies were liberated. Either there should be asymmetric warfare or conventional instruments of warfare used against a particular nation, or then the second option is that you build up international pressure. You build up international opinion against an outrage against an illegal occupation. And there, let me tell you that although the media is not writing the stories as it wrote last year, but I can tell you that the window is still open. And I'm so pleased that last year, many Kashmiri writers, and the New York Times, and Washington Post, and the Guardian, and the Times, and the Time magazine, and the Newsweek magazine, these places used to be barred for Kashmiris. You still have that space. And I was told by Dr. Mujahid that there is an academic network which is also available. We have to tap into that network because, as some of the participants were saying, that Indians weave these false narratives and then they propagate them. And we also have to present the true narrative or the true side of the story, not only through the media, but also through solid academic work, whether it is lawfare, if we are talking about whether through diplomatic channels, or whether through solid academic work. Now, there's one point that I want to highlight, that when we condemn India for its crimes against humanity, we are not talking about 1.3 billion people of India. We're talking about Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh and the Bharatiya Janata Party, because they have hijacked Indian politics and they are imposing this doctrine of Hindutva, religious supremacy over Indian citizens, over entire South Asian neighborhood, because they want to recreate Akhand Bharat and they want to disintegrate Pakistan. So we are fighting against fascism, reincarnation of fascism in an even uglier form in this century. And it is our responsibility, not just as Kashmiris and Pakistanis or citizens of South Asia, but as members of entire humanity, citizens of entire humanity. We have to fight this battle, because these zealots, these fascists sitting in Delhi, they can trigger a nuclear war. I can warn you. And the first victims would be Kashmiris, in fact, the people of Jammu and Kashmir. So we have to muster the support of the Indian civil society, because in the immediate aftermath of the illegal actions that were taken by the BJP on August the 5th last year, you know, many political parties and civil society organizations in India, women's organizations, they spoke up against Indian atrocities and Indian illegal actions in Kashmir. So we have to enlist their support. Let me also highlight, and this theme was touched on by one of the participants, the Kashmiris have not been passive victims. They are the bravest nation on the face of the earth. You know, I always say this. At one point, I was representing Pakistan in the United Nations Security Council. And I can tell you that it was our full-time task to monitor conflicts. I can tell you that Kashmir is the only place on earth where one side is completely disarmed. You go to Africa or to Latin America or some parts of Asia, the Balkans, there used to be armed groups. But in Kashmir, on the one hand, or on one side, we have 900,000 troops, and on the other side, we have unarmed, non-combatant Kashmiris. And still they have pinned down 900,000 troops there because they want azadi, they want freedom. So, and they have sacrificed their lives for liberty and freedom. So never ever say that Kashmiris have been passive victims. They have fought back without weapons to save their lives, to save their homes, to save their neighborhoods, to save their nation, to save their homeland, where they are being made homeless. Now, I agree with the suggestion that we should invest heavily in global outreach and activism. And in that context, we must fulfill our individual responsibilities. Our responsibilities as groups, where groups do not exist, we should form them, and we should work as communities. And as I said earlier, in this past year, India's reputation as the largest democracy was hurt, was hit. It was hit hard. And the international community and the Kashmiri diaspora community was able to break many taboos about India. Let's regain that momentum, and let's regain that traction that we achieved last year, and it is possible. I want to conclude, but I would appreciate that if today we issue a statement or a declaration expressing our full solidarity with the prisoners in Kashmiri and Indian jails. And on top of the list is, of course, Asia Indrabi, whose son spoke today so movingly. Because as yesterday in one of the seminars here, there was a lady who said that Asia Indrabi has committed no crime. She usually chants or listens to Pakistan's national anthem. And she has a group which is called Dukhtarane Millat. It's a group of women who express their political aspirations. She hasn't killed anybody. She hasn't used violence against anybody. And yet she's been moved to a punishment ward or a penitentiary where the most notorious prisoners are imprisoned. So let's call for the release of these political prisoners, Asia Indrabi, Yasin Malik, Shabir Shah, many others, Masarat Alam Bhat, Mr. Musawi, Mirwais Umar Farooq, Sayyid Ali Gilani. I end here, and I've been asked also by Hamad to thank Dr. Abdul Jabbar, who is Director, Justice for All, for his efforts to organize this event. This is a unique event, and today I complimented you right in the beginning, and I want to conclude by congratulating all of you again. I mean, not only the organizers and the hosts, but also participants. And as I said, that this kind of conversation should go to multiple audiences, to all freedom-loving people all around the world, so that we can genuinely start an international Kashmir freedom self-determination movement. Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much for being with us. Jazakallah khair. To have you on here, and just wanted to remind everybody that we are broadcasting in Canada, in the United States and Mexico, and globally on social media, but Muslim Network TV is broadcasting us to all 3 countries. So you are being watched and heard by millions across the world. So right now I'm going to go through some of the questions and answers that have been sent in. And if our panelists would like to take those questions, I'm going to unmute our panelists. One of the questions that has been asked several times is, what can we do, some action items that can be done to move the needle forward? We have discussed many things that have been done across the globe after August 5th last year. Much more activity, many more voices of Kashmiris highlighted, but some movement forward in the freedom struggle that perhaps has not been touched on by any of the panelists, especially when it concerns the United Nations. We have shared a petition that people can sign, but this is something that this is a theme in some of the questions, is what is the action plan now? What can we do next? So we're run out of time, and so at this point I'd like to invite our 2 Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid and Imam Abdul Jabbar. Imam Abdul Jabbar, mashallah, is our team lead for Kashmir. His ancestors are from Kashmir. His wife is from occupied Kashmir, and he has been such a light in our lives, guiding us. And he's written the beautiful khutbah that you can find on Justice for All page, and as well as many other Muslim websites have published it. This is something that we urge you all to share. I remember a time when I was growing up, and or you'd go into a masjid and you would hear du'as for Kashmir. You would hear people talking about Kashmir from the mimbar, but after 9/11, that sort of died down, and that has been really detrimental to the cause of the Muslim Ummah So we urge you this Eid to go, and the Eid du'as are on justiceforall.org /Kashmir rally. Please ask your khatibs to make dua for Kashmir during Eid Salah, and give them the khutbah. A lot of times, a ready-made khutbah on Kashmir. This is a something that you can definitely do. So we'll share the link right here. And so inshallah, Imam Abdul Malik and Imam Jabbar, please.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I can tell you this, that listening to Kashmiri voices, I have just grown while in last 2 hours in confidence that this freedom movement will achieve success, inshallah. And we are moving forward. All those people who are listening and they are not Kashmiris like myself need to resolve it for themselves that Kashmiri voices are the one which are being denied. And those voices need to be central. Those voices need to be heard by United Nations and everyone else. We have a lot of educational work to do. I remember almost a couple of years ago, just before a masjid in New Jersey invited me, and they were, after listening to khutbah, they were inspired to invite me for lunch. And there were 10, 12 people followed for the lunch. And one of the questions they had was, is Kashmir in Afghanistan? And I said, my goodness, this is after the whole khutbah. And they are the people who pray for Kashmir. So we have a lot of educational work to be done, number one. And it cannot be given, assigned to one or the other organization and individual. It has to be a collective responsibility. While listening to Kashmiri voices, I have been taking my notes. I have increased my time commitment, inshaAllah, for Kashmir cause. And I have noted that these voices need to be translated into multiple languages. Sometimes even people who love Kashmir and have been making dua for them in many masjids in Chicago do not know much. And that's why we have developed an exhibit on Kashmir, on 10-panel exhibit, and one Holocaust Museum Center has actually adopted that and to educate people. So education in one major area, and we need your help and support. The primary help is needed is your time commitment. So once again, I request you to go online, and Connor, please put up just that link, how people can commit 3 hours a week for next 3 months for the Kashmir cause. I would like at the end to thank each one of you who have inspired and moved us. And I like to thank the organizer, Dr. Abdul Jabbar, as well as Hina Zubairi, and rest of the Justice for All team. As a volunteer leader of Justice for All, I can tell you it is important to have solidarity. Justice for All has emerged as the leading human rights organization of Muslims in America. We have been working on human rights causes for the last 25 years, starting from the Bosnia tragedy. Right now, we are working on 5 causes. And I was surprised I accidentally put Kashmir notice on Rohingya as well as Uyghur forums, which we have. And I saw their duas and their love for you. So we need to develop this solidarity. And I will end by saying a similar rally is going to take place on August 22nd, because Burma has started the genocide, final solution of the genocide of Rohingya Muslims 2 years ago on August 27th. So August 22nd is going to be a program like that. Although most of the people here are Kashmiris, but I like all of us to stand up in solidarity with this. Master of Islamophobia has made the job of every butcher around the world easy. But Muslims are not going to rest, whether it's Kashmiris, are Mali people, which hardly anybody knows what is going on in Mali now, or people in Sudan, or even in Syria and Arab Spring. Muslims throughout the world are standing up. So never think Muslim are oppressed. Think Muslim are standing up for freedom, justice, democracy, and Islam. We need to pray for them and we need to support them. But we need to just pick one cause and focus on it. And I appeal to you, to this audience, to focus on Kashmir cause while we continue to pray and contribute for other causes. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wassalamu ala Rasuli Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام فحينا ربنا بالسلام تباركت ربنا وتعاليت يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. O God, you are peace and peace comes from you. Allow us to live and subsist in peace. You are the blessed one, our Lord. You are exalted one. O you with magnificence and majesty. O Allah, our prayers for the people of Kashmir are full of hope. O Allah, our prayers to you to help and to bring lasting peace in Kashmir and other parts of the world where our brothers and sisters are being persecuted. O Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we pray for the turmoil to end. O Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our hearts go out to the innocent children in Kashmir who were maimed and blinded due to pellet guns, to the youth who have been picked up from their homes and are detained in jails of India thousands of miles away from their homes. O Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, give sabr jameel to those parents who have lost their children and youth during this struggle. O Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, give the innocent Kashmiris the strength to deal with the oppression they encounter.
Amen.
O Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we pray for the dignity and freedom of our Kashmiri brothers and sisters, for peace and normality to be restored, right of self-determination to be granted to them.
Amen.
O Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we invoke your mercy and forgiveness for 100,000 Kashmiris who have laid down sacrifices for freedom until now.
Amen.
We pray for all those who dedicate their lives to fighting oppression and striving towards justice and peace.
Amen.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we seek protection with you from the accursed devil, that he harms us in our religion or in our lives. Allahumma izzal Islam wal Muslimin.
Amen.
Allahumma izzal Islam wal Muslimin wa adhill ash-shirka wal mushrikeen wa dammir a'da' ad-din warham hawzat al-islami ya rabbal alameen. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala khayri khalqi Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een birahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Amen.
Jazakallah khair. It's for all of you for being here and being a part of this rally. We didn't know what a digital rally would look like. This was something that we experimented with. You know, Bernie Sanders been having his throughout his campaign. And alhamdulillah, the most beautiful part about this was having all these beautiful voices from around the globe attend and watch. And we're watching that on social media as well. And just keep, diverse points of view. Many, as Sister Shaista had shared before, we have to be, even though we might not agree with tactics, we might not agree with each other on ideologies or whatever, but when the enemy is common, you have to be united on one. And alhamdulillah, if we can be united on a justice platform, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us victory and give our sisters and brothers in Kashmir victory When to motivate ourselves, we have to think of them as our bosses. We have to think of them as the people we are answerable to after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So thank you so much for all of you for being here, and for all of you watching, for staying with us for this long. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.